Chapter 2. God's Law. The weight of the air became incredibly heavy almost suddenly, strong enough to crush everyone inside the ward if they weren't of the Kitson race. Everyone in the room, standing up, was forced down on their knees. The elderly doctor enveloped the child with protection to protect her from the effects of this anomaly. Something was amiss, and they would find it precisely in moments. The whistling of malignancy twisted and turned everything outside, and before long, that whisper of darkness breezed from the outside into the room.
No, no, no! This can't be!
Conan abruptly lifted himself from the chair he once was in, gawking over Hurrit. His words reverberated throughout the room, startling a few of his mates. They all looked in his direction, trying to maintain their stance and the magic they used to keep Hurrit alive. To their dismay, and the reason why Conan was standing flustered and shook, a deep, booming voice followed the tempest that had caused quite a ruckus within the hospital. Conan and his mistresses could only hear the voice, leaving everyone else wondering what was happening.
Filthy mortals, playing the game of gods, aren't we? You even went ahead and attempted to conceal your dark dealings with forbidden magic. Foolish.
Conan tried to cover his ears just from the voice resonating in his mind, but his attempt to silence it was in vain. Hurrit, who now sported a worrying feature, looked about the room as though she could find the gods speaking within her mind. Rena found herself behind Vixen, and the other mistresses focused their magic. One slip up, and Hurrit's life would be relinquished for sure.
Killing you would be too merciful,
a female's voice added, reverberating deep within their minds. Conan wanted to fight and oppose whoever was speaking to them. As foolish as it sounded, yet his body resisted his mind. Even if they were considered more than powerful compared to anyone in this world, fighting the gods equally was beyond his wildest dreams. After all, anyone who resists the divine faces death. Conan knew this, and he was sure his mistresses were educated enough to know.
Show yourself!
Conan demanded, to which he received a light push from the dark winds that twisted and turned within the room.
Those of divinity take no orders from mortals. We will now bestow our punishment on you all. Your generation will eternally suffer for as long as you live.
The male voice informed.
From now on, your kin will never bear a child. Let this one be the first and last.
The woman finally had spoken their punishment. After the two gods had spoken, the dark wind swirled within the room, keeping them brutally shot into each sentenced individual. The wind entered everyone's stomachs, save for the doctors and the young Kitsun resting in the doctor's embrace. The wind left divine runes that were subtle at first, but ultimately vanished. All of them were gasping for air, their expressions printed with fear after receiving the punishment from the gods. They were marked by divinity, cursed for eternal infertility, and the crushing pressure from earlier seemingly disappeared. What would strike them next was a wave of shock flanked by sorrow. Due to the mistresses failing to maintain their spell during the gods' eternal and divine judgment, their sister, the birth giver of what brought punishment to them, rapidly lost herself to the blackness of death.
Hurrit, no! Girls, the healing! We must start the healing spell again!
Dana shouted, rushing back to her feet. All the Kitsons scattered about did the same, but it was too late. The initial divine judgment, along with the shredding of the newborn, was enough to leave Hurrit stunned in death. Her eyes were wide, and without a blink. Life was no longer glinting in her eyes. Death had scavenged her soul right before the very eyes of those that called her a sister, but more importantly, a life mate.
Hurrit, no, no,
Conan whispered as he struggled to get himself up from his knees.
I did not mean for any of this to happen. Yes, I was aware of the repercussion, but our plan was solid. Where have we gone wrong? I hate you. You've taken from me, and I shall take from you.
Conan swore, fully standing from his position. His demeanor was no longer that of a broken man, but one of a sharpened state, eagerness oozing from his stare. He was determined to utilize the experiment that had been birthed to its utmost capabilities. There was only silence in the room. Nothing could disturb their state of being, especially now that Conan was heated with hatred, jealousy, and blind justification. The octet all were silent for far different reasons, though. They all processed what had just happened to them. They wouldn't be the catalyst to instill a break in the silence. Instead, the baby's crying was what followed Conan's anger. The crying kitsune was enough to break everyone from their deep trance. The shield that was protecting the baby that the doctor manifested disappeared as the doctor cradled the baby to calm her down, but she didn't seem to want to do so. The older doctor's arms were shaking out of fear as well. He was aware that he wasn't just holding any ordinary child, but probably the most powerful being in existence right now that could match the gods. The doctor tried to hand the baby to the nearest kitsune life mate, Vixen, but something was amiss. Instead, she gazed away, her face turning pale white as she struggled to hold the young infant in her arms. Vixen's gaze never left Hurit's face, not even as she attempted to maintain the strength to hold the baby. Nikita and Dina's eyes fell to the ground. Kimi, the most impulsive of the lot, could not speak. Rena cowered away from Vixen and the baby while Shren, Fifion, and Alawa shifted behind Conan.
What?
Conan growled, demanding their attention.
Our daughter will benefit all of us. You don't. I don't care. I can't even look at her. She has taken from you too, Conan, Vixen replied. Our most prized weapon has been permitted to live, untouched by gods. Shouldn't we take advantage of that? Dina grunted.
Conan's glare moved from one life mate to the next, analyzing their displeasure and distancing from the young infant. The more he looked at them, the more he saw himself in them. He, too, had distanced himself from many things in life, and now that something had gone from bad to worse, he wanted to turn away. Hearing Vixen's absolute disrespect to Conan and hate towards their daughter was enough to make him feel disappointment and swelling of anger. His fists shifted to red, and the mana broiling within him dared to tip over in a lash out, but he maintained face. Before he could say anything back, Fifion stepped up to the Vixen after passing Conan.
I'll take her.
Vixen immediately handed the baby over. Fifion looked at the baby with a subtle smile and a gentle expression, cradling her ever so gently. The doctors would rush everyone out of the room, leaving them with only Hurit. Before Conan took his leave, he remained somber and drowned in sadness, standing over the bed. His mind raced, heart pumping, as his thoughts formulated images of a trio of young kitsune. The first was himself, brash and adventurous. The second was a follower, argumentative, yet tough to the end. That was his now deceased life mate, Hurit. The last was a boy, meek, adroit, and compassionate. He never left his sister's side. He was truly a family-oriented boy. The kitsune both faded as Conan turned his back on them. His face no longer looked upon his life mate. Instead, he was again turning away from the misfortunes of his life. Just outside, Fifion looked upon the young baby.
You, little one, will help us live longer. You will serve us, obey us, and protect us from all the other creatures. You are the key to our immortal lives.
She whispered so gently that someone might have mistaken what she said for something innocent. The baby smiled and giggled, holding her hands up to reach for Fifion's face. Their visit to the hospital had come and gone, just as the month had. The clan of Kitsune had once again returned home with one less member. Conan's family inhabits the deepest mountains, and somewhere in the habitat is a tall forest, dense with monsters. Their manor is in that forest, isolated from any civilization. Everything within the castle was as though they had left it, but their emotions were not in the same state they had left the castle mansion with. What once was a feeling of celebratory and victorious glee was now a hunkering, sorrowful sensation of defeat in the guts of all involved. Conan was the one struck the hardest, though sealing himself in his corridor, refusing to see anyone, not even the infant that was visited one by the life mates, not because they desired to spend time with her, but to make sure she was alive and fed well. Tonight was Fifion's turn to look over the young kitsune. Slowly and meticulously, she stepped in, staring over at the only thing within the room. There were no paintings, colors, toys, or anything worth denoting. The room was ivory with a single cradle for the young kitsune to sleep in. Fifion approached slowly. Ever so slowly, her presence brought some semblance of delight to the young baby that previously stared solely at the white ceiling. The young kitsune elicited in broken baby language. Fifion rolled her eyes and cradled the baby. The action took the young kitsune to sleep in a matter of seconds. News of the newborn began to be whispered throughout the lands. The ears of keen kitsune picked up on the grandiose information. Some expressed happiness for the heads of the clan, others pondered over the timing, and the rest didn't give it a peace of mind. One ear that this news reached was none other than a close family member of the head clan. Conan hovered over the doorknob of the room that contained Fifion and his daughter. He could not twist it, and he couldn't enter. He stood there reminiscing the first time he went on an adventure with Hurit and her older brother. Sadness swept over his form once again, and just as he was ready to turn to leave, he was discovered by their latest visitor.
Where is she?
Ketu shouted from inside the castle. His breath was heavy, and sweat glistened on his forehead. He must run from outside the gates towards the interior of Conan's property. Conan came to sight as soon as he shouted, approaching with such elegance that Ketu scrunched his face over.
Where is my sister? Where is Hurit? What did you do to her?
He shouted at the master of the mansion.
I did nothing. It was a decision that all 10 of us decided, including Hurit herself.
Conan gently explained, the imagery of his younger self merging with him, while the others did the same, save for Hurit's, who phased into eternity. Ketu could only growl in response, and as tempting as it was to hit him in the face, he stopped himself. Ketu would not stop in his ventures, though. As he approached Conan, he glared deep into his eyes.
What is that supposed to mean, huh? Where is she? How is it she had a baby and does not inform me or anyone else in her family? Since when was she pregnant? I deserve to know the answers to all my questions. There is a lot you don't know. I guess the first thing you should know is Hurit is no longer with us.
Conan's voice cracked, and tears provoked his status quo. Would he show weakness here, before a former best friend and the weapon he had created carried by one of his life mates? Perhaps it didn't matter now that Ketu's pale face was in front of him. Ketu was without words, frozen as though the frigid wisps of Cocytus. It crept up his spine, nipping at his sanity. Seconds crackled under the pressure of his heartbreak, and as he wanted to pounce and brutalize Conan, or at least attempt to, Ketu stopped himself once again. This time, he was stopped by what was presented to him. Conan stood with his hand against the open white door to his daughter's room. On the other end stood Fifion holding the now reawakened baby. For the first time, Ketu would meet the young kitsune girl.